Alrighty, so as I think about the next couple of weeks ahead of us, I just want to, and I said this last week, and I read your write ups for what app you are thinking of developing. So, what I did today before I worked on the Learn Together is I drafted the first part, and there's going to be two parts to our develop it, our dev zero. Okay, so part two is going to be, I'm going to talk about it next week. So the first part of what you're going to do is basically what we've been doing with both Andrew's note app and my email app is just create a program that does CRUD operations for a topic of your choosing. So what I've done here is I've drafted the requirements. And so what I want you to do this week is I want you to review these requirements and ask me any questions about this, okay? And then know that when our code review comes up in a couple of weeks in week 6, right? Here's the requirements. And also I want you to look through this, right? So the idea that you need to bring part of the code review is actually bringing code that works to me. So if you're bringing code that is not working, it depends here on the level of errors that you might be having, but that's a big deduction in points. Actually, this first part, and I haven't had this happen where students don't do a code review at all. Most of them understand the importance of being able to do this because this is just a part of this industry, is being able to sit down with someone, describe your code, describe your thinking, and then for them to ask you questions about it. Okay, so just giving you kind of an outline, right? So once you get this done, so obviously the sooner you work on this, the better, which is when I look at our course schedule, kind of nice because in this case, you can start working on this part. And I'll have by next week what the breakdown of points will be here. It won't be 50-50. I think it'll be more heavily weighted here. But the second part is as important, which we'll start talking about in a minute. So I talk the last thing in here, and I've said this, but if you haven't heard it, if you can't come see me in person, we can also do this online. I will have a schedule in the next probably week or so. We are about 2 weeks out from this, so I'll put together a schedule, and you will be at the same schedule as my 93 class, so I'll just have a bunch of dates and times that you can schedule to meet with me that week. Know those fill up pretty quick. So getting them done is a really good idea. Okay, so that's the first part of this, is actually reviewing that and thinking about it. Because for our Learn Together week 4, and that was, what I started with was kind of this part, right? So ask me any questions or clarify anything in there that you just didn't make quite clear for you. But just to kind of talk a minute before we jump into this too, is that Andrew covered debugging in this part of what you had to go through, and we went up to 33 as far as the lecture code along goes. So I can't tell you how important it is to learn how to debug your code. We're doing this right now also in the client side, but here in Node, and specifically here, because there's multiple ways to do debugging. Also, obviously, console log is one way, but there are better tools out there, and learning how to use those better tools are really helpful. So just for a second, because I think I want to just briefly here, right? So I'm going to move over to my editor real quick. I have his Node app up, and I'm going to run node inspect break app to the command, passing it title and body, right? And this is the way because he was showing how to do it at the command line, but I think realistically this is just probably a better way to do this. And then you just go to Chrome, right? Go to inspect, and then here hit this inspect, which I don't think you have to add the folder. Maybe I did and I forgot I had done it. But understanding how to set a breakpoint in your code and then how to step through it. So as an example right here, right, being able to, well, you can do it wherever now. This is the idea of having your app.js and then your modularized, your other code in a external file that you then do module.exports to expose and then to require here. So in this case, it's really important to be able to step through your code and know, like, what's it going to do? Like, oh yeah, okay, so in this case, and this is one of the things that happened, and I think this is why he ended up, oh yeah, this is actually why he ended up bringing in the folder, uh, because it will actually call these other things. So let me actually just do that. I'm glad I remembered that. So in this case, if I do it here, right, and come down to like here, and then run that, right, and it stops here, and then I step through it. This is because what happens is when you're doing it without adding this folder, it ends up calling some of the other things that you don't normally see that get called when you're running your code. Well, what's important about this is to actually, it helps you understand code at a deeper level when you can see what's running. So as an example, when I was on the handler on the yargs, and this showed what was being passed as far as arguments into this function, and then you can watch it run line by line. And there's just, now this can happen, and you can just jump over this and jump over it a couple of times to get back into, I actually was thinking it wouldn't do this because of the way we're running, but evidently that's not true. Step over, and then it brings it back here. But the point is that it's not made well here. I get that. But you can see your code run, and that is a really helpful thing regardless. And again, right, being able to at least start looking at some of these tools. Now, the other thing I'm going to say is that before, because I hadn't used this as much as I just used the built-in tools from Node, which has its own. But where this got a little involved was because we're passing things on the command line. So when we're doing that, it's a little, you have to set up some other things in here. And that's why I was like, I won't show that. So I just want you to know that the sooner, right, you kind of get a better level debugging tool rather than the console.log, it's a really good thing. Okay, that's my whole point about that. So this week we really start talking about what is really going to be with us for the rest of this course, which is writing asynchronous JavaScript. And we're starting with one of the classic examples, which is making HTTP requests, okay? And so you saw in Andrew's code what he was doing, right? Which he was using, getting the city state, passing it to Mapbox API, getting back the Latin and long, and then passing that to dark skies to get the current temperature. And this is a very common pattern we see in doing front-end development, back-end development, is being able to make a call to an API, and that's an HTTP request, right? And getting back some information that we can then use to possibly make another call. So I think understanding this pattern, and this is going to be part 2 of our develop it, and I'm going to think about how we're going to do this part in the coming week, is for me to think about that. But in order to do that, you really need to spend a little time here in this part of understanding the loop, right? The event loop, and we're going to actually end up learning 3 different ways to make these asynchronous. To write asynchronous code. We're going to start with callbacks, we'll end up doing promises, and then we'll do async await. But once you learn the pattern, then learning the next way to, and I say way, but the next paradigm is much easier. So, right, the sooner you get this, the better. and also spending enough time to really understand this, because this right here, this understanding this event loop is one of the things that I find that when I talk to people who do JavaScript stuff, they don't often have a good grasp of this. So getting a, a really deep understanding, or at least the beginning of a deep understanding, is really helpful here. Okay. So again, spend a little time, and he recommends watching this now and then watching it again when you get to the end of this section, and I could not agree more. There's also a great video on the web on YouTube for this. So coming back here, so what I want you to do, so I want you to, now that you've started this, and we're going to finish it with Andrew this coming week, I want you to at least play around with, because I'm going to have you use another, and the thing about these APIs is they're starting to get behind paywalls, to where some of the ones you might want to use will either require you to pay or just to log in, like the two that he's shown us. So when I can find one that's kind of fun and doesn't require any sign up, I love it. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you use the random user API, which is here. I already have it up. This is, if you go to that HTTP URL, this is a result. So it just sends back a random user, right? And then what I want you to do, like he was showing us how to do, which, by the way, I can't install that nice little Chrome extension for looking at JavaScript, so I actually have to do a JSON view formatter. Found this out today, which was not fun. So I definitely recommend, if you can, installing that, so that when you go and you look at this code, it just is really, it's so much nicer to be able to look at it like this, okay? Because then it'll help you do the assignment you need to do for this week, all right? So what I want you to do is get a user, and that user's output, right? That user, the JSON response from that will have Latin long in it, okay? So I want you, just for this week, this should be, I hope, pretty fun, right? So is set up that call to, using the request third-party library. Again, you've already seen how to do this in the course. And now all you have to do is figure out how to grab off of that response the first name, the gender, and their Latin long. And I just abbreviated them here, right? And remember, right? And again, here's what I'm ultimately going to have you do next week is like get that random user, figure out, and then I'm going to play around with this. Last time I did this, I actually had them, if it was female, then send back and make another call to dark sky to find out the forecast where that person, is located. So I'll do something next week kind of like that, right? But for today, I just want you to play around with, the idea of somebody's given you an API. And by the way, if you have one you want to play with and give us an example, please do that as well. And there is really something to be said for being able to go out, find and read documentation that is provided through these APIs. Like I've spent a bit of time looking through some of the Google Map API geolocation stuff. And so it's really helped me the more you read this documentation to understand it. So let me just show you. I have it in another terminal. Oh, I did have it in another terminal. Let me just actually do that real quick. So I have it setting in. And by the way, you are going to need to set up a new directory in our Learn Together in public. Okay. And this one is going to be called random user. Okay. And then just clear this, make it a little bigger so you can see it. And I have my app.js. So I'm not going to show you the code here, but basically here's what it would output. How about I do the write command, right? So it's making that API call. It's saying the random female user is female, and here's their Latin long. And I think what I said in the instructions, so just do that, is like give me their first name, gender, and their Latin long, right? So know how to output, so know how to make that call using request, how to drill down into that, because look at what's coming back, right? So when you look at what's coming back here, being able to then point to a specific piece of data because it's coming back results. And then within results, there's gender, and then there's location, right? And then with location, so I'm kind of helping you there a little bit, is knowing how to navigate that and then be able to pull those pieces of information out. Okay. So that's what we're doing this week, setting us up for starting to think about our Dev Zero, looking at those requirements, asking me any questions that you have, and playing around with this idea of understanding HTTP requests, and then how our beginning of understanding asynchronous JavaScript. All right, have a good one. Talk to you later.